Good morning. We are here with Dean Jacqueline Jones of the School of Global Journalism and Communication. Dean Jones earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from George Washington University. She has worked in newsrooms all around the world, including the Baltimore Evening Sun, Detroit Free Press, New York Newsday, the Philadelphia Daily News, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and the Washington Post. She is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who has served on the board of directors for the National Association of Black Journalists and also represented the NABJ on the Accredited Council on Education in Journalism and Mass Communications for more than 25 years. She started out at Morgan State University as assistant dean and chair of the Department of Journalism multimedia journalism in 2013 and currently serves as our Dean of the School of Global Journalism and Communications. Good morning, Dean Jones.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story that you won the Pulitzer for?
Yeah, it was awarded to the newsroom of New York Newsday. It was a subway crash where the motorman was drinking and drugging for hours before his shift began. He lost control of the train, smashed into pylons because the train jumped tracks, and a bunch of people were killed. He survived with basically no injuries,
Wow.
and uh, disappeared for like 2 or 3 days afterwards. And later we found out that he had gone to a park across the street from where the incident happened. And he had sat in the park and watched all the first responders and people being brought out. And he just didn't, he sat and watched for a while. He didn't go to anybody's assistance. He didn't turn himself into the police. He just sat there for a while and kind of sobered up, and then he went home.
Wow.
And we had the lead reporter on the story, Mitch Gelman, was able to use his sources to track down where this guy lived and went and interviewed him, and he confessed the whole thing to Mitch. And so I was an editor at the time, so I was on the desk, and I was one of several editors who kind of talked to Mitch each day about where he was going, what he was doing, editing parts of the story. So this was something that continued for several days, but we were there the day we were all in the newsroom the day it happened. And so everybody was all hands on deck. So people were calling their sources, they were trying to get other information. Even something as simple as getting the number off the train car would tell you what train it belonged to, what line it was on. The time of day would give you a sense of who was driving the train, all kinds of details you can get. Something small can yield a lot of detail. And so we just kind of worked together around the clock to make that happen. So it was a really an amazing week or so of just following that story day in and day out, and largely working around the clock because things would happen at 11 o'clock at night. Somebody had to go out and cover it, or they had to make a phone call, or they had to make an adjustment. And we had to try to work through a schedule that ensured that reporters got some rest, but they also wanted to follow their story. If it had been left to Mitch, he would have never gone home and taken a nap. And so, a couple of times we had to force him and say, go home, come back in the morning, there'll still be more for you to do. And so we just kind of went through that whole process. It was pretty exciting.
Wow. So, kind of piggybacking off of that, for investigative stories, what would you say to students that kind of have that fear of what should I say? What interview questions should I ask? What if no one is contacting me back? How did you kind of overcome that as a journalist?
When I was a young journalist, we didn't do as first of all, we didn't have the technology, so we weren't emailing, texting people. We had to the ideal, and I continue to emphasize this, is to talk to people in person if you can. Call them on the phone, schedule an interview. Uh, what I find in students today is that they expect someone to respond quickly to an email or a text, and people of a certain age or a certain generation just aren't going to do that. If somebody sends me an email and I don't really know you, and you say, can I ask you some questions about who are you? I just, I'm not gonna. I don't respond to strangers. Just like you look at your phone and you don't recognize a number you don't pick up.
Right.
I'm not going to respond to an email from somebody because I don't know who they are. You have to establish some relationship, and you have to do it quickly because I want you to. If you need to get to me and you call me, you don't get an answer. You send me an email and say, I just left you a voice message and this is who I am. This is what I want. I'm going to call back to A, see if you got my email, and B, or my voicemail. And then I want to set up a time to talk. This is how much time of your time I expect it to take. You don't have to book everything for an hour. You can ask for a half an hour of somebody's time. The interview may only take 10 or 15 minutes. They may want to talk to you longer. So don't book things so closely to one another that you have to bail on an interview if you finally get it and you finally get the person to talk. What I have found over the years is it can sometimes be easier in the beginning.
Okay.
When you're starting out, you're getting that first job. You are not considered a threat. You are just trying to get in, master your skills, do the best job, get recognized so that you can either move up or move on to the next level. When you get to the point where you have a platform, where you are in some ways an influencer, when you are someone who can command an audience and really make people pay you attention. I think of the late Gwen Eiffel, who's a good friend. I think of Michelle Norris at NPR. I think of Michelle Martin at NPR. I think of uh, columnist Michelle Singletary at the Washington Post, who's a business columnist. These are all women who have um, done well in their profession, but they've had ups and downs along the way. I look at what Joy Reid has gone through. You look at what happens to Black women when you kind of bump heads with your bosses or your editors, and whether you survive that experience or whether you get diminished in some way or you fall um, to ratings.
Right.
You know, I think women still have to go through things that men don't. Somebody doesn't like your hair and they start writing the station. What's wrong with her hair? She needs a new wig. You know, all of those things. I've had a couple of friends who've had language written into their contracts that require them to either wear certain things or not wear certain things. I had a friend who cut her hair just before sweeps, and her news director almost had a cow. So they put language in her next contract that said 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after sweeps, you cannot make a radical change to your appearance.
Wow.
And so there are always going to be those things, you know, and then you end up with folks who go through sort of the political issues like a Joanne Reed. And so you're constantly having to watch what you say, what you do, where you are in public, and those kinds of things, and that can be very stressful. I think those who navigate it best are those who know who they are, know what they stand for, and use their platforms in the best possible way, and don't shrink from the truth. I mean, when you start adjusting yourself to satisfy someone, and they know that you're doing that, it never ends because there's always something that they're going to find fault with. It's the same with language. If you look at what we're going through right now with DEI, at one point uh, we talked about affirmative action. Right. Affirmative action became a pejorative. Then we talked about inclusion. Then we talked about diversity. Then it became DEI. And at each step along the way, someone found a way to turn that into something that you didn't want to be aligned with because it could threaten your job or threaten your position. And at some point, you have to say, there is nothing wrong with wanting to cover everybody. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with calling out injustice or inequity. After that, you're going to rise, you're going to fall, things are going to change. Women have always had this little extra thing because men, regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, or anything else, often get uncomfortable with having a woman who can compete with them in an environment. It's just life. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it, but I think that you should be aware of it and know that you're going to always have to figure out how you're going to navigate that space, and there's no one set way to do it. Joy Reid is going to be fine,
Yes.
and so while I don't like what happened to her, I'm not worried for her. And I think if you can position yourself to have that said about you as a journalist or a media professional, then I think you've got it made.
Thank you.
My pleasure.